Jasmine Crockett stood on the CNN stage, her emerald green blazer catching the studio lights as she gripped the microphone with unwavering confidence. Just seconds earlier, House Minority Leader HAKEEM Jeffries had dropped a bombshell comment that left the audience gasping. "The progressive wing is destroying our party's chances with their radical ideas." The words hung in the air like thunder before a storm. Crockett, the rising star Congresswoman from Texas, was supposed to be there for a friendly panel discussion about Democratic unity, but now with cameras rolling and millions watching, her eyes narrowed with fierce determination. This wasn't just another political debate. This was her moment to challenge the establishment figure who had just thrown her entire movement under the bus. Jeff, with his polished Washington image and establishment backing, clearly didn't expect what was coming next. But Crockett, armed with facts and the fire of conviction, was about to turn this CNN segment into a showdown that would shake Democratic politics to its core. Before we dive into what happened next, hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell so you won't miss our latest political analysis and breakdowns of Washington's most explosive moments. The sleek CNN studio buzzed with tension as the lights dimmed slightly around the circular table where four prominent Democrats had gathered for what was supposed to be a cordial discussion about party strategy. HAKEEM Jeffries sat with perfect posture, his navy suit impeccably pressed, his Harvard-educated confidence radiating as the established voice of Democratic leadership. At 53, he had climbed every rung of the political ladder methodically from New York Assembly to House Democratic leader, becoming the heir apparent to Nancy Pelosi's legacy. "We need a unified message that appeals to moderate voters in swing districts," Jeff had been saying, his tone measured and authoritative. "That's how we win back the House in November." The other panelists nodded in agreement. A former Obama staffer and a centrist think tank director, both clearly deferential to Jeff's status. But then came the comment that ignited everything, and frankly, Jeff, with his sudden intensity, leaned forward. "We need to rein in the progressive wing's unrealistic demands. Their radical policies and confrontational style are alienating voters. We need a message that the American people aren't ready for." The camera cut to Jasmine Crockett, and the contrast couldn't have been more striking. At 43, the freshman Congresswoman from Texas's 30th District represented everything the establishment both feared and needed. A former civil rights attorney who had risen from the Texas state legislature to Congress in just 2 years, bringing with her an unapologetic advocacy for progressive policies and a growing social media following that gave her a platform independent of party leadership. Crockett's background wasn't the polished path of Ivy Leagues and political connections. She'd worked as a public defender in Texas, fighting in the trenches of a system she saw as fundamentally unjust. Her election to Congress wasn't handed to her. She'd fought for it, bringing together a coalition of young voters, people of color, and working-class supporters who believed in her promise to fight for real change. As Jeff's words hung in the air, the stakes became instantly clear to everyone watching. This wasn't just about a policy disagreement, it was about the very soul and future of the Democratic Party. Would it be the measured incremental approach of establishment figures like Jeff, or the bold transformative vision championed by progressives like Crockett? The CNN moderator, sensing ratings gold, turned immediately to Crockett. "Congresswoman, it sounds like Leader Jeff just characterized your wing of the party as a liability. Your response?" The split screen showed Jeff's confident smile, a veteran who clearly believed he could easily handle this freshman's response, juxtaposed with Crockett's steely gaze. But what Jeff didn't know was that Crockett hadn't come unprepared. Unlike many progressives before her, who had been caught off guard by establishment attacks, she had anticipated this moment and came armed with more than just righteous indignation. "Thank you for that question," Crockett began, her voice calm but with an unmistakable edge. "And thank you, Leader Jeff, for finally saying out loud what many in leadership have only whispered behind closed doors." The audience could feel it. This wasn't going to be a standard political dodge. Crockett was about to bring the fight directly to the second most powerful Democrat in the House live on national television. "Let me be perfectly clear," Crockett continued, turning to face Jeff directly. "When you call our policies radical, what exactly are you referring to? Universal health care that every other developed nation already has. A living wage so working people don't need 3 jobs to survive. Climate action so our planet remains habitable." The moderator, sensing the building tension, tried to interject, but Crockett held up her hand. "No, I'd really like Leader Jeff to explain which of these radical policies are supposedly driving voters away because the polling tells a completely different story." Jeff maintained his composure, his practiced smile never wavering, as he leaned toward his microphone. "Congresswoman, I think you're mischaracterizing my point. We all want progress, but we need to be strategic. Your approach, my approach." Crockett interrupted, her voice rising slightly. "Let's talk about approaches. Leader Jeff, in the last election cycle, progressive candidates outperformed establishment Democrats in swing districts by an average of 5 points. That's not my opinion. That's data from the DNC's own internal analysis." The camera caught Jeff's momentary flinch, a crack in the polished exterior he hadn't expected her to come armed with the party's own numbers. "That analysis is incomplete and doesn't account for," he began, but Crockett was ready. "I have the full report right here," she said, holding up her tablet. "Would you like me to share the specific findings about which messages actually resonated with voters in Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin?" The CNN chyron, at the bottom of the screen, quickly updated. "Crockett confronts Jeff with donation records live on air. This is a gross misrepresentation," Jeff responded, his voice rising slightly. "Campaign finance is complex, and suggesting that donations influence policy decisions is," Crockett pressed, "is that accurate? Because the American people aren't stupid, Leader Jeff. They can see the connection between who funds campaigns and which policies advance or die." She swiped on her tablet again. "Let's talk about the climate provisions that were stripped from the infrastructure bill. You personally assured progressive members that those provisions would be included in subsequent legislation. 2 years later, we're still waiting. While you've received over $300,000 from energy companies opposed to those exact provisions." The moderator, recognizing the explosive nature of the moment, tried to interject some balance. "Leader Jeff, how do you respond to these specific allegations?" Jeff, straightening his jacket, buying himself a moment to compose his response, said, "Congresswoman, Crockett is new to Washington. She doesn't understand how complex legislative negotiations are. We fight for every inch of progress we can get. I may be new to Washington," Crockett replied, her voice now resonating with controlled anger, "but I'm not new to recognizing when someone's avoiding the question. The American people deserve straight answers." She turned toward the audience. "Leader Jeff wants you to believe that progressives are the problem because we actually try to deliver what we promise. He calls our policies radical, but what's truly radical is accepting a system where millions can't afford health care, where working full-time doesn't pay the bills, where we watch our planet burn, while politicians take checks from the corporations causing the damage. The focus of the cameras shifted back and forth between Crockett's impassioned delivery and Jeff's increasingly uncomfortable expression. What the establishment fears isn't that our policies will fail, Crockett continued. They fear that our policies will succeed and upset the comfortable arrangement they have with their donors. Then came the moment that would be replayed on news shows, shared across social media, and discussed in political circles for weeks to come. Crockett pulled up another document on her tablet and slid it across the table to Jeff. This is your voting record on progressive priorities compared to your public statement supporting those same priorities, she said calmly. 27 times in the past 3 years, you've publicly endorsed policies that you then helped kill behind closed doors. The camera zoomed in on the document, and the damning evidence was clear for millions of viewers to see. Side by side were Jeff's public statements supporting progressive policies and the procedural moves he'd made to undermine those same policies. That's a selective and misleading presentation, Jeffries stammered, visibly unsettled. Is it? Crockett asked, her confidence growing as she sensed the momentum shifting definitively in her favor. Because I have the receipts for every single instance. Should we go through them one by one? Without waiting for an answer, she continued. March 15 last year, you told CNN you strongly support a $15 minimum wage. That same week, you worked with moderates to attach poison pill amendments that you knew would sink the bill. Jeff reached for his water glass, buying time. June 22. You publicly backed stronger voting rights protections while simultaneously working to weaken the enforcement mechanisms in the actual legislation. Jeffrey attempted to interrupt, but Crockett was on a roll. Her voice rising with righteous indignation. September 8, you stood at a press conference declaring climate change the existential crisis of our time. Your words, while your staff was literally drafting weakened emission standards at the request of donors from the fossil fuel industry. The other panelists sat in stunned silence. The moderator, recognizing the historic television unfolding before him, didn't dare interrupt. This isn't about progressive versus moderate, Crockett declared, addressing the viewers directly. It's about honesty versus hypocrisy. It's about whether we actually fight for the people who elected us or just pretend to while serving other interests. She turned back to Jeff. Her voice softening slightly but losing none of its power. Leader Jeff, the American people are struggling. They're drowning in medical debt, working multiple jobs to make rent, watching opportunities slip away from their children. They don't need politicians who tell them change is impossible. They need champions who fight for them as hard as you're currently fighting for your donors. The silence that followed was deafening. Jeff looked genuinely shaken. His usual eloquence abandoned him as he fumbled for a response. I have always worked for what I believe is in the best interest of the American people and our party, he finally managed. I believe you think that's true, Crockett replied, her tone now almost sympathetic, but the evidence tells a different story, and it's time for the Democratic Party to decide. Do we want to be the party that fights for working people, or the party that just claims to while protecting the status quo? She gestured toward the tablet still sitting in front of Jeff. The receipts don't lie, leader, and the American people deserve better than what they've been getting. The CNN producer's voice crackled urgently in the moderator's ear. This is going viral. Every network is picking it up. Don't go to commercial, no matter what. The moderator nodded almost imperceptibly and turned to Jeff. Leader, would you like to address these specific discrepancies that Congresswoman Crockett has highlighted? Jeff, a skilled politician who had navigated countless difficult interviews, found himself in uncharted territory. His usual arsenal of deflections and pivots would only dig him deeper into the hole Crockett had created with her meticulous receipts. What matters is moving forward, he attempted, internal party disagreements. Don't serve with respect, Crockett interrupted. The American people don't want to move forward from accountability. They want leaders who say what they mean and mean what they say. The game had changed. In less than 15 minutes, Jasmine Crockett had done what few progressives had managed before. Caught the establishment in its contradictions with irrefutable evidence live on national television, leaving one of the party's most powerful figures struggling for words. Within minutes of the segment ending, the confrontation between Crockett and Jeff exploded across social media. Crockett receipts began trending nationwide, with clips of her most devastating moments being shared millions of times. The segment where she slid her tablet across to Jeff, quickly dubbed the receipt drop, became an instant meme with people using the image to represent calling out hypocrisy in all contexts. Progressive media outlets immediately declared it a watershed moment. Crockett just changed how progressives fight back. Read the headline on the Young Turks. Establishment caught red-handed. Crockett brings receipts. Declared common dreams. Even mainstream outlets couldn't ignore the significance, with CNN's own post-show analysis calling it the most consequential internal Democratic confrontation since AOC arrived in Congress. Conservative media sensing blood in the water amplified the conflict with gleeful headlines about Democratic civil war. Fox News ran with, "Dem leadership exposed. Crockett reveals party's empty promises," but even their commentators had to acknowledge Crockett's effectiveness, with one reluctantly admitting, "Love her policies or hate them, she came prepared and she didn't blink." Twitter, now X, was ablaze with reactions. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez tweeted, "This is how it's done. Bring the receipts. Always." Jasmine Crockett, Texas, showing us all how accountability works. Bernie Sanders shared the clip with a simple message: "The status quo is getting nervous." Good. Even some moderates found themselves impressed by Crockett's preparation and delivery. Regardless of where you stand on the policies, the gap between public statements and private actions is a legitimate issue. Tweeted a centrist Democratic strategist. By evening, the clip had reached over 50 million views across platforms. Morning shows were already booking guests to discuss the fallout. Political analysts scrambled to understand what this meant for Democratic Party dynamics. Behind the scenes, the response was even more dramatic. Progressive members of Congress flooded Crockett's office with calls of support and congratulations. Several who had previously been hesitant to challenge leadership publicly were reportedly reconsidering their approach. Jasmine showed us that with the right preparation, we can win these fights. One anonymous House progressive told Politico, "The leadership's two-faced approach only works when it happens in the shadows." Democratic voters responded with an outpouring of support for Crockett. Her campaign email list grew by 200,000 in a single day. Small dollar donations flooded in, with her campaign reporting over $3 million raised in the 24 hours following the confrontation.